You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. And of course, this episode and every episode of Sox in the Basement brought to you by Cork and Kerry at the Park, Shadow of the Ballpark, 33rd in Princeton. An amazing award-winning menu of ballpark favorites. Their burgers, again, award-winning, and it shows. The staff is incredible. They get you fed. They get you to the game. They've got an incredible bar, indoor-outdoor seating. It's fun for the whole family, and it's a big party after the game, win or lose. See everything they have going on. Close out the season in style at Cork and Kerry at the Park. See more at corkandkerry.com.
You know what they should have there?
What?
Speed dating events, so you have more reason to go to Cork and Kerry.
Listen, I'll tell you, I mentioned at the beginning of the last show, that was fun. Like, I went more as a curiosity. Like, I thought it would just be just like a freak show. That was an awful lot of fun. Like, I would never use a dating app again after going to that. I mean, I had 11 blind dates, 6 minutes at a time, and I just enjoyed speaking with somebody instead of swiping. I thought that was really neat. I'd recommend it to anybody. I'm also feeling pretty good about myself. Ed, out of the 11 lovely ladies that were there, 5 of them picked me. So the guy still got it.
That's less than half.
The guy I see it as close to half. I mean, I felt like that was an accomplishment.
No, that's really good. I have a feeling if I went on a speed dating thing, the only person that would pick me would be the janitor to help him out.
I mean, like, I felt good about myself. Like, I was like, that's pretty. That's a solid number right there, right?
That's a solid number. You got to figure most people come out of there with maybe 1, maybe 2.
Right.
You know, that showed any real interest. But yeah, to have solidly half of them, and who knows, maybe one of them was on the fence and it's kind of 50-50 there. So you got that 50% number.
I'm going to tell you something. I needed that. It was fun. And again, I'd recommend it. I would also recommend that the White Sox start winning games because I'm loving the lineup consistency. I'd like to see more victories.
Well, yeah, this is where maybe the year-long depression and or lack of talent is starting to rear its head because, you have that consistency, but they're not doing anything with it necessarily.
Well, you can see that there's a better attitude. You can see there's more effort on the field. You can see there's a difference with Grady in charge and some of these coaches, including Pedro, no longer there anymore. You can see better communication between the front office and the guy that's sitting there in the manager's seat. And I think that's where that consistency comes from. And you can see Chris Getz's plan for who he wants to get at bats and the guys he's trying to figure out. And that was something we couldn't get from Pedro Grifol. So that's all positive. You're just a bad team. That's the negative. You look at this right now, where they're at in the order is extremely consistent. Where everybody is batting is extremely consistent. Their base order is Lopez, Robert Jr., Benintendi, Vaughn, Sheets, Vargas, Lee, Fletcher, Baldwin. Jokes is getting in sometimes. Lenny Sosa gets rotated in from time to time. For Nicky Lopez, generally it's Nicky Lopez he's getting rotated in for. And Chucky Robinson sometimes takes over for Corey Lee. But it's not like with Pedro where Lee was going 50% of the games. He's played in 4 out of the last 5 at the catcher position. So you see what Pedro was doing that Getz didn't agree with. And I love that consistency. I would just like to see them, it'll wear off eventually, right? Like the after firing new manager glow is going to fade very quickly if you don't win every once in a while. You don't need to even be 500, but you can't just like win once a week again. You got to find a way to scrape some of them together, and you're kind of hoping for that, and you're starting to see some life out of guys. Like Dominic Fletcher is a guy that we liked at the beginning of the season. Everything fell apart for him. I'm seeing some great defensive plays and some nice hits and some nice at-bats. And there might still be hope for the kid. And I don't think I would have been able to see that if he didn't get the consistent at-bats. And I guess that's my hope right now, is that we're going to build on this and we're not just at the height of this little post-firing pop. Like, it's almost like, remember when La Russa left And then there was all this, oh, look at this, we just need to change the guy there, and everybody was really happy, but then it all fades away. And I don't think Sizemore is the manager of the future, but I'd like to just see them string a few wins together, because otherwise they're going to go right back into the dumps, and you're not going to accomplish anything. You got to find a way to win some ball games.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is what's referred to as the dead cat bounce. I mean, yes, the cat hit the ground and went back up in the air as though it were still alive and did that under its own power. But the fact is, it's still the corpse of a cat that lands back down very quickly, and then you realize it's dead. So
that was so descriptive.
I know, but
so over the top.
Yeah, I know. But what you start to wonder, and what you're looking for. You mentioned Dominic Fletcher, for example. Here's a guy that, when he was with the Diamondbacks and he's in the middle of a winning season and he's on a good team and a good lineup and he's contributing and he's doing well and he's showing that his minor league numbers do translate to the major leagues, albeit in a small sample size, you got a feeling like this guy's talent was legit. And then he comes up here and he's anointed right away. And we kind of figured at the start of the season, maybe that got into his head a little bit. But is there something that Grady Sizemore, an all-star, a Major League Baseball player for a number of years, a guy who went through some issues, because he had health problems and did make a comeback there, but he'd been to the top of the mountain and the bottom of the pile. And, he might have more insight for Dominic Fletcher than what Pedro was willing to let Grady Sizemore give him early on in the season. And one of my fears early on was that Pedro was just letting Dominic Fletcher go out there and fail. And he wasn't putting him in a good spot to show what he could really do. And he wasn't giving him a chance to clear his head and go play baseball. Now I think you're starting to see some of that. I think with Benintendi, there was pressure, for example, coming out of last year where he didn't hit any homers, to come out here and hit for power. And we heard about that in the offseason, that he had quote unquote bulked up, and we didn't know what that meant. But we're seeing him actually hit for some power lately. And, there's something to be said about mental freedom for a baseball player that allows them to just swing the bat and allows them to just track the ball down and go and have a little bit of fun trying to do stuff and put it together. What we're going to find out in the Grady Sizemore run is not whether or not Grady Sizemore is a manager that is capable of running a clubhouse, not whether or not Grady Sizemore knows the X's and O's of the game. What we're going to find out is, was there something that was going on with the prior manager and his coaching staff and how he ran the clubhouse that was detrimental to some of the players on this team? And you're going to see that by just them coming alive towards the end of the season. There's nothing to play for except for just the game itself at this point. Dominic Fletcher is not necessarily playing for his major league career, but he is playing for an opportunity to show that he can really get it done. Brooks Baldwin is this is his tryout, and Andrew Benintendi, this is him, either proving that he's worth the richest contract in White Sox history, or proving that to another team that maybe is a contender where he can go and do something. If you don't think the White Sox are going to contend in the next couple of years that he's on the team, maybe he's building his value, and that's what Chris Getz wants, right? He wants value to be built for guys, and also what are some guys that maybe can perform a little bit here? Can Nicky Lopez show something to where, even if he's going to a team that's going to use him again as a utility infielder, can I get something that helps move my team forward out of him in the offseason? So there's a lot going on here that Grady Sizemore can help build, the least of which, unfortunately for him, is his own managerial resume.
Sox in the Basement listeners, for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They are not traveling salesmen who show up at your door with a dingy little example and you got to look in a book and try to pick out what your windows are going to look like. Instead, get into their big, beautiful showroom where there's an owner on site and also on site when they put in your windows. All Window and Door Superstore installers, they don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands are custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is 1/2 block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. Did you see this thing, the new proposal for pitchers? Major League Baseball is considering the idea of forcing starting pitchers to go 6 innings. And the caveat is they can leave the game before 6 innings are completed if they throw 100 pitches, if the pitcher gives up 4 or more earned runs, or if the pitcher is injured, but then it would have to be an injury that requires an IL stint. So essentially what Major League Baseball is trying to do here is there's multiple things they're trying to do here. One, they're trying to bring back the prestige of the pitchers and get them more, become more of a thing like the starting pitcher. But two, that third time through the lineup, if it happens to happen in that 6th inning, or if the pitcher is starting to get close to 100 pitches and that team has seen him enough, it's going to increase balls in play and run scoring. And that's what Major League Baseball always wants. They want more runs being scored in games. Now, I get the idea of 100 pitches. That's enough. You can come out early. And I get the 4 or more earned run things. What they're literally using is they're using the quality start statistic. You have a quality start, and we've talked about it before. I want to see more and more of these. This is how I judge if a pitcher did well. If your guy can't go 6 and give up 3 or less, it was not a quality start. Whenever somebody's walking off the mound after 4 2/3 and they've given up 3 runs, and the announcer's like, well, he struck out 7, he had a great game. I go, that's not a great game. He didn't even get a quality start. So what Major League Baseball is saying is if the pitcher still has the opportunity to get the quality starts, 6 innings pitched and 3 or less earned runs, they should stay in the game. I agree with all of it, except I know it takes away the opener. I know it takes away some strategy, and you wonder how that IL thing would go over. Because the first argument you can make is you're going to have a guy who doesn't feel real good, but doesn't want to go on the IL, and they'll push it further, and they'll injure themselves further. So I wonder how that would get worked out.
Well, I think that last one, going backwards, I think the can get pulled for an injury but it requires an IL stay. I imagine that won't stand because if a guy feels a little soreness in his shoulder or in his elbow or feels some tightness, they got to come out. And I would say
miss a start. Maybe it's one of those things where they're just not available for X amount of days afterwards.
That makes more sense.
There is no such injury that you could walk off the mound for where you're just going to be ready 5 days later to go out and pitch 6 innings, right? Because we are saying you need to be capable of 100 pitches or 6 innings. So if you couldn't do it a game beforehand, no team in their right mind would want to send you out 6 days later. Playing fantasy baseball, you know that. You get pitchers, it's like, well, he got removed early and he's questionable for his next start. He may not go on the IL. Well, if you know he's got to get 100 pitches or 6 innings in the next start and he came out early in this one, you had to remove him due to injury. If it's a legitimate injury, no team would want to start him there anyway. So that might be the compromise of you have to skip a start. Like in a regular 5-man rotation, he has to skip his next start at minimum if it's not the IL stay.
But, and at that point, though, it's still going to be an IL stay because what's the team going to do? They're not going to go 4-man for the next turn through the rotation just because, one of your pitchers got pulled early because he felt some tightness.
Well, then create a special IL. Create like a 7-day IL. That's only for pitchers that are removed from games during this thing. They do that stuff all the time. They have a 15-day IL, and then all of a sudden it'll be a 10-day IL, and we got a special COVID IL. They come up with that all the time. They used to call it the DL. Now it's the IL. So they can adjust that for this. So let's say they went and did this. Do you like it? Because here's the funny thing. I like it. I hate when they tinker with the game. I think one of the dumbest things in the world that we do is we put a runner on second base at extra innings. I hate it. There's certain things I don't like about when they're tinkering. I don't even mind the pitch clock. I remember I wasn't happy with the pitch clock. I don't even notice it. I'm totally fine with the pitch clock being there now. I'm like, well, it wasn't a bad idea. Games are in reasonable times. I love it, right? But this one here, my gut feeling just reading the proposal for the first time is, well, I like this because I do think the starting pitcher should be capable of going deep in the games. And I do think this matches the philosophy of the Bannister pitching lab and what he's preached far more than it would have matched previous pitching styles that the White Sox used. that get up there, throw it as hard as you can. Who cares if Dylan Cease only goes 4 2/3? We don't need him to go all the way. We'll just have these big, giant bullpens. And we saw how that doesn't work in the first place for us. But I think it would benefit the White Sox with their current philosophy if that were to happen, with the only downside being the White Sox also have a philosophy of wanting to get their young pitchers up and get them work. And Garrett Crochet could not be doing this 4-inning thing because they're trying to extend him out because he's never had that many innings. He would have to become a reliever, and he wouldn't even be able to be seen until the 6th inning because it's not like you could have an opener. So like he would become like a multi-inning reliever that would start in the 6th inning. Like if you were bringing up a pitcher who you wanted to get work of 2 or 3 innings and get them used to Major League Baseball, you would have to structure it where you had a starting pitcher get you 6, and then they would pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And you'd it'd be like a spring training game where you're splitting the game up on those starts when you're using a guy like a Crochet or you're trying out a new young pitcher. That would be the only thing. That's the only hang up. Teams that are trying to get experience for young pitchers will have some issues. They may even have to go to the Baltimore Orioles Grayson Rodriguez thing or what they're doing right now with Noah Schultz in the minors, where you start once a week because your arm isn't up for anything else, and you'd have to get more creative on how you use your young pitchers too.
There's a multitude of problems with making it a requirement. Now, I will say this. In the Atlantic League, they're talking about, term I saw used for it was the double hook DH, which was basically if your pitcher fails to go 5 innings, your starting pitcher fails to go 5 innings, you also forfeit your designated hitter for the rest of the game. So if you pull a guy early,
the pitcher has to bat then?
Well, then the pitcher spot, the DH spot goes to the pitcher like it would have years ago before the DH rule was in effect.
Well, so we got rid of the DH, but now we're going to bring back the pitcher hitting as a penalty.
As a penalty for a starting pitcher not going 5.
It's so dumb.
See, now, but here's the thing. You think that that's a dumb idea to basically penalize a team that can't get a starting pitcher out there to go 6 innings, give you the quality start, like you're saying, okay? But you're in favor of a rule that would make it so that bullpen games are a thing of the past, right? So that a team that has double headers or they're, they have those really long extended inning games, a very deep extra inning game where maybe they've had to use a starting pitcher to cover some innings in that game, or all the things that can happen where for legitimate reasons there might be a game here or there where somebody managing a young pitcher, is trying to work within an innings limit, or even a guy coming back from an injury is trying to work within an innings limit. There's a lot of things that go into it that making it a hard and fast rule where you have to you forfeit that pitcher's next start, or you have to put him on the IL, or what's the upshot if they do pull him out? What is it? So if there's going to be a penalty in game that says if your pitcher doesn't do this, you lose your designated hitter, I find more utility in that because it's basically saying, look, at your own peril. Okay, is your bench deep enough now to pinch hit every time that comes up? Do you have enough guys on real hitters to cover what could be 2 or 3 at bats, depending on how the game goes, for that pitcher spot?
Yeah, that is also interesting. Like you have to construct your team a little smarter. You know, like the baseball fan in me goes, bring it on. Like, because to me, the thing I love about baseball, and I know a lot of other people love this aspect of the game. If you really sit back and you think about it, the reason you love baseball, if you really truly love it, you love the strategy of the game. You love the idea
that's
of
been the appeal.
The individual performance of the batter when he gets up there in the middle of a team sport. You love the fact that managers have to make moves. There's a reason why you weren't happy with the DH becoming permanent, because there was a strategy involved in having to figure out what you were going to do with your pitcher. There are things that you love about the games and the strategy.
Having a professional pinch hitter, usually a guy that couldn't play the field worth a damn, right? But was almost automatic when they came to the plate that they could at least put the bat on the ball. And potentially get you, a sac fly, potentially get you at least a base hit, turn that spot in the lineup over. That was a legitimate, that was like a job and a skill and a talent for almost a century.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, the baseball fan in me loves anything that creates more strategy, loves anything that makes the game more complicated, makes anything more intricate, that forces teams to have to be smarter. The White Sox fan in me hates that because we're too stupid to be able to play that game. Like we play checkers already while everybody else is playing chess, it seems like sometimes. If we make this more difficult, we just give more reasons for us to lose games. So like the baseball fan in me loves the idea you have to create like a team that is able to handle all these situations and have an intelligent manager. And you got to see whether or not you can outsmart the other team along with outplaying them. But the White Sox fan in me says, well, this will just make us suck more.
Yeah, I think you're giving too much credit to the White Sox sometimes, saying we're playing checkers while everybody else is playing chess. I tend to think that, you know, the White Sox sometimes are playing chutes and ladders with no dice or game pieces.
Like that's the thing. Like, think the history of the White Sox under Jerry Reinsdorf. The people he has kept in place way longer than they should have. The internal hires, the bad decisions, and those that make those decisions, and where the team is currently. And ask yourself, is this team capable of finding the little things before other teams do so they can take advantage of it and strategize and defeat other people? Do you have confidence in a Jerry Reinsdorf team and those that he hires and keeps in place in doing that? Like there's a spark of it. Like I continue to say he may not have been the general manager that I wanted, and the book is not completely written on him, and there are things that I don't like about Chris Getz, but I do love the idea that he's brought in people from the outside. I do love what he's talking about with essentially saying in his last big press conference that they've got to address hitting in the same way that they've been addressing pitching, with trying to find somebody that's going to oversee the entire thing, understanding that he's not the expert, which is something we never got from Kenny Williams. Kenny Williams was the smartest man in the room. Just ask him, he'd tell you. And Rick Hahn is an attorney who thought that made him a genius. So we're not dealing with that anymore. So there is that positive that there might be somebody who's sitting there who understands we need to find smart people who are good at doing those things. The issue, though, continues to be that the owner every once in a while wants to call him in and put his input in. He wants to bring in his buddy Tony to sit next to him, and it muddies up things. So again, I mean, that's going to happen with this manager search. You know that's what's going to happen with this manager search.
100%.
Right? Like Getz is going to go look at every candidate he could possibly look at. He's going to pick out somebody he really, really likes. He's going to go bring it to Jerry. And in the meantime, Jerry will be calling one of the old boys network, or Tony will be sitting there pushing some other guy. And then Getz has to sit in there and basically beg. He's got to convince two guys who think that they're smarter than him because they think they're smarter. They think that being there longer makes them smarter. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Getz is right, but I know they're wrong because I've watched them make bad move after bad move after bad move, especially Jerry. Some of us go into an office place or work in an office like this right now where somebody will do something terrible or make mistakes or treat the people that are newer to the office poorly. And then when you ask them, why do you do that? They go, well, that's how I was treated when I was younger. Or now that I'm here longer, I can do whatever I want to, and I know I'm right. And even if I'm wrong, I'm still right because I got seniority. That's what runs the White Sox. Old guys that do that. And that's what the general manager has to contend with when he goes out and searches for a manager. So, I mean, that is the one storyline. That's the only storyline right now that really matters. Well, that and whether or not Jerry will spend any money, which I know for sure now he's not going to, Ed, because he reduced season ticket holder prices by 10%. So he didn't lower prices because he's increasing payroll. It isn't all the fans. He's not lowering prices across the board. No, he's giving a 10% discount, which is essentially the tax on the tickets. He's giving them essentially the tax on the tickets back, is what he's doing with a 10% off. I mean, it's not like a massive amount of money, but it's only if you're buying season tickets. But I know that if he gives any money back, that's because he isn't spending more money. Like, I'd be shocked if I saw an increase in payroll when Jerry Reinsdorf reduces tickets for anybody. Sox in the Basement listeners at any stage of your retirement planning, give a call to Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor. Located on the corner of 111th and Kedzie, but serving the Chicagoland area, Tom has a get-to-know-you approach and a do-the-right-thing attitude. He's been doing this for decades. It's all about knowing your options when you're investing and planning for your retirement. No matter what stage you are at, it costs nothing to check in with Tom. Give Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor, a call today, 773-779-0023. Edward Jones, member SIPC. Did you see the perfect game or near perfect game on Tuesday? with the White Sox and Yankees? Did you notice there was a near perfect game as we close this out? Did you see that? The umpire in a 4-1 loss, Gabe Morales, behind the plate, 100% strike call accuracy. All 50 of them were called correctly. And then he called 124 balls during the game. One of them was actually a strike. And when you look at it, it's just barely the top of the ball striking the zone. Like, you could make the argument of, I don't know, that's probably as close as it could be to being a 100% perfect game. Like, and the thing is,
that's pretty good.
Like Major League Baseball, you know, we can get these stats now. Major League Baseball needs to do a better job of rewarding that, right? Like, that guy should be behind the plate all the time. You know, like, I don't understand the idea of rotating him through. I mean, is it really that much of a wear and tear on him? Like, if you could find guys that can do that behind the plate, what do you need robots for? Make sure that guy's part of a crew, and if there's another guy in his crew that's as good as that, move that guy to another crew and make them permanent home plate umpires. Like, I'd rather see that than the automated thing. Like, the automated thing's coming. But the funny thing is that they know there's guys who are good at it, and they know there's guys that suck at it, and they give them all equal amount of time to go do it. Which is maybe like the dumbest thing ever. It's like being part of a bomber crew in World War II, right? And telling the guy who's the navigator, you fly the plane today, and telling the guy that hits that's the bombardier, you're going to shoot the tail gun. They would all die. But Major League Baseball rotates their umpires this way, and then wonders why everybody's always critical of their product.
Well, it's just because it was always done that way, right? It was just, this is the way it's always been done. We always rotated the umpires. And I do know that the umpires behind home plate take some wear and tear, but to your point, you know, when you're watching Morales the other day, okay, and you know, you don't have to be keeping up with the stats to realize, like, this guy's calling a really great game. Like, you know, I don't have a quibble with anything that's going on. It's almost in the background, right? You're just watching the game and it's going along, and you're not sitting there going, what was that? And you're not seeing anything demonstrative from the pitchers. You're not seeing the catcher do the thing where they sort of half turn around like, you okay back there, Blue? You know, eyeballs doing okay? Didn't fall out on the ground, didn't actually accidentally throw one back to the pitcher. It is refreshing to see. And yeah, in an era where we're talking, I mean, we've talked this entire show about tweaking the game and introducing new rules and making it so that certain things happen the way that we think they should happen.
That's an obvious tweak.
That is an obvious tweak. Is, you know, a guy who is really good behind the plate should just always be behind the plate.
I don't even know his name until I read this. Like, I had no idea that there was a guy who was an umpire by the name of Gabe Morales in Major League Baseball. You want to know why? Because I've never seen a reel, a video, a clip, a breakdown, or anything. Now, I'm sure somebody will find one because I'm sure he had a bad day out there somewhere, right? But I don't remember him. Like, I when I looked at it, I was like, I don't even know who this guy is. And there's a reason I don't know who he is, because he's just back there calling things accurately. Because it shouldn't be the ump show. Yeah,
think about the umpires you know. You know Country Joe West because Joe West was a terrible ump. You know Angel Hernandez because he was a terrible umpire.
Terrible.
And you know Mark Wegner because, what are you doing, Wegner?
I know a lot of the names because of Hawk. I mean, let's be honest. Like,
let's face it, we all know him because of Hawk.
Because Hawk would yell about him. Hawk would yell about a guy like Joe West, and then he would later say, oh, he's a great ump. And you're like, what, Hawk? What? Did he buy you dinner? Like, he is still terrible, Hawk. You were right when you yelled about him. And now you're like sucking up to him today on the show. And then you would hear him doing that too. You would hear him talking about, oh, you know, a lot of people give Joe a hard time. And, you know, I mean, I've yelled about him before, but he's pretty good. And then in the middle of him trying to talk Joe up, like Joe West would call one of those ridiculous balks on Mark Burley that only Joe West would do.
Yeah.
And then Hawk would lose it again. You gotta be bleeping me, Joe. And then he would be mad at him for the rest of the game. And then you'd have to hear him again, like try to be nice to him until he did something to the White Sox. And Joe West hated Ozzie Guillen. I think that was always obvious. Ozzie hated him, Joe. And you hear Ozzie now like try to be like, oh, you know, but I mean, you could see that. I mean, you felt sometimes that guy made calls just to get Ozzie angry so he could throw Ozzie out of the game. Gabe Morales, though, man, I want to see more of him and not know any of their names.
Yes, anonymous umpires would be wonderful.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.